Okay, let's dive right in today. We're going deep into a really intense story. It's from the Hebrew Bible, 1 Samuel chapter 30.
Yeah, it's quite the account. It's all about loss, leadership pushed to the absolute limit, and, well, a pretty incredible turnaround.
So let's set the scene. We've got David and his 600 men. They're coming back to their base, Ziklag, after being away for 3 days.
Right, probably tired, expecting to get back home. But what they find, it's just not what anyone would expect. It's devastating.
Devastating is the word. Our source paints a grim picture. Ziklag. It's been burned to the ground.
Totally destroyed. Apparently, the Amalekites had raided through the area of the Negev, hit Ziklag, attacked it, burned it, total destruction.
And the people. What happened to the families, the women, the children?
That's the real gut punch. They'd taken everyone captive, women, children, old, young, all of them, carried off.
Wow.
But interestingly, the text specifically says they hadn't killed anyone, just took them. Imagine returning to smoking ruins and silence. Everyone gone.
The reaction must have been, I can't even imagine.
Exactly. The source says David and his men just broke down. They wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep. It's described as complete physical exhaustion from grief.
Just utter despair.
And for David personally, it was even sharper. His two wives, Ahenah and Abigail, were among those taken.
So he's dealing with his own loss plus the collective trauma of his men.
Right. But then it gets worse for him. The men, understandably bitter and grieving for their own families, they actually turn on David.
Turn on him. How?
The text says they start talking about stoning him, blaming him for the disaster.
Stoning him. His own men. That's the absolute lowest point, surely. Everything's gone, everyone's captured, and now his followers want to kill him.
It looks like it's completely falling apart. But this is where we see something remarkable. The text gives us this pivot point. It says, David found strength in the Lord his God.
Okay, so in the middle of this chaos, this personal and leadership crisis, he finds a source of strength beyond himself.
Precisely. And it's not just a feeling. It leads to immediate, very specific action.
What does he do? Does he try to placate the men?
No, his first move is to seek guidance. He calls for Abiathar the priest and tells him to bring the ephod.
The ephod. That was used for discerning God's will, right? Like getting divine direction.
Exactly. It wasn't just priestly clothing. It was an instrument for seeking guidance. So David doesn't just react out of anger or fear. He pauses, finds his footing, and asks for direction.
What does he ask?
A very direct, practical question. Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? He needs to know if chasing them is the right move and if it will actually succeed.
Okay, so he's looking for a clear go and assurance.
And he gets it. The answer from the Lord is incredibly clear and empowering. Pursue them. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue.
Wow. Certainly overtake them. That's unambiguous.
Absolutely. No maybe, no perhaps. It's a definite promise of success, and that gives him the mandate, the confidence to move forward.
So armed with that divine assurance, what's next?
He rallies the men, all 600 of them. Despite the grief, the exhaustion, they set out immediately, leaving Ziklag's ruins behind to pursue the Amalekites.
But it's not going to be easy, I imagine. They're starting from behind. They're exhausted.
Right, and they hit an obstacle pretty quickly. They reach the Besor ravine, and the text tells us 200 of the men are just too worn out. They physically cannot cross it to continue the pursuit.
200? That's a third of his force? What does he do? Turn back. Wait.
No, he makes a tough call. He has to split his force. The 200 exhausted men stay behind at the ravine, probably to rest, maybe guard any supplies they had left.
Okay.
And David, he presses on with the remaining 400. It shows, a real determination, sticking to the mission, even with fewer men.
400 men chasing what sounds like a large raiding party. The odds still seem tough.
They are. But then something completely unexpected happens. They're out in the field pursuing, and they find someone.
Who? One of the captives.
No, an Egyptian slave, actually, and he's in a terrible state.
What's his story?
His Amalekite master had just abandoned him 3 days earlier because he got sick, left him for dead. He hadn't had any food or water for 3 days and nights.
3 days. Wow. So he's from the raiding party.
He was with the raiding party. And this is where it gets interesting. David's men, instead of seeing an enemy or just ignoring him, they show compassion.
What do they do?
They give him water, they give him food. The text mentions figs and raisins. Simple stuff, but life-saving for him. And it revives him.
An act of kindness in the middle of a desperate chase.
And that kindness unlocks everything. Once the Egyptian recovers a bit, David starts asking questions. Who do you belong to? Where are you from?
And he talks.
He does. He tells them he's Egyptian, a slave to an Amalekite. And crucially, he confirms that his group was the one that raided the Negev, Judah's territory, and yes, burned Ziklag.
So this is it. This random encounter gives them confirmation and potentially a guide.
Exactly. David asks the million-dollar question. Can you lead me down to this raiding party?
The man left for dead now holds the key to finding everyone.
Incredible, isn't it? But the Egyptian is smart. He makes David swear an oath to God first.
An oath? About what?
That David won't kill him and won't hand him back to his former master. He needs protection.
That seems fair. Does David agree?
The text implies he does, because the next thing we know, the Egyptian is leading them.
So where does he lead them? Straight into an ambush?
No, straight to the Amalekites. And the scene they find is, well, it's a stark contrast to David's camp. The Amalekites are scattered all over the countryside.
Scattered, not defending themselves?
Not at all. They're eating, drinking, and reveling, basically having a massive party with all the plunder they took from the Philistines in Judah. They felt completely safe, overconfident.
Celebrating way too early. Big mistake.
Huge mistake. David and his 400 men attack, and the source says the fight was intense and long. It went from dusk until the evening of the next day.
This is like a full 24 hours of fighting.
Seems like it. A relentless assault, and the result, almost total victory for David.
Almost. Do some getaway?
Few. The text says, except 400 young men who rode off on camels and fled. But the main force, the ones with the captives and plunder, they were dealt with.
And the captives? The plunder. Did they get it back?
Everything. The text is emphatic here. David recovered everything the Amalekites had taken, including his 2 wives. It repeats for clarity. Nothing was missing. Young or old, boy or girl, plunder or anything else they had taken. David brought everything back.
Wow. Complete recovery, just like the promise he received.
Exactly. Total restoration. They even got back all the livestock, driving it ahead of them, and David's men are shouting, "This is David's plunder!" A clear statement of victory.
What an incredible turnaround. From utter despair and mutiny to complete victory and recovery. So the mission's accomplished.
You'd think the story ends there, right?
Yeah.
Happy reunion, right off into the sunset. But there's one more crucial part.
Oh, what happens?
They return to the Besor ravine, where the 200 exhausted men were waiting. The victors meet those who stayed behind, and David greets them.
Okay, a reunion. Sounds good so far.
But then, some trouble starts brewing. The source calls them all the evil men and troublemakers among David's followers.
Uh-oh. What do they want?
They didn't think it was fair for the 200 who stayed behind to get a share of the plunder, the recovered goods.
Seriously. After everything.
Yeah. Their argument was basically, these guys didn't fight, so they don't deserve the spoils. Let them take their wives and children back, that's it. But the wealth belongs to us who fought.
Wow. That could split the group right open again. How does David handle this?
He shuts it down immediately. No, my brothers, he says, you must not do that. He completely rejects their idea.
On what grounds?
Huh.
Just because he's the leader?
No, he grounds it theologically, you could say. He reminds them where the victory came from. With what the Lord has given us, he has protected us and handed over to us the forces that came against us. He frames the plunder as a gift from God, not just something they earned by fighting.
Okay, so it's God's provision, not just their spoils of war.
Exactly. Then he dismisses their argument, who will listen to what you say, and lays down a principle, a really important one.
What's the principle?
He declares, the share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as that of him who went down to the battle. All will share alike.
Equal shares. For those who fought and those who guarded the base.
Yes. It's a radical idea, perhaps. It recognizes that the support role, guarding the supplies, was also essential for the mission's success. They enabled the fighters to go forward. Everyone contributed to the victory, so everyone shares in the reward.
That's actually a very profound leadership principle, valuing all necessary roles, not just the frontline fighters.
It really is. And it wasn't just a one-off decision for that day. The text adds that David made this a statute and ordinance for Israel from that day to this. It became law.
So this crisis actually led to establishing a long-lasting rule about fairness and recognizing different contributions.
Pretty amazing. And David doesn't stop there. With the internal conflict resolved, he takes some of the recovered plunder.
Yeah. What does he do with it?
He doesn't just keep it for himself or his men. He sends gifts, portions of the plunder, to his friends the elders of Judah and various towns listed in the text, places where he and his men had connections.
Why does he do that? Spreading the wealth.
It's partly generosity, partly shrewd politics, maybe? Strengthening alliances. But look how he frames it. He sends the gift saying, "Here is a present for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies."
Ah, so he's sharing God's victory, reinforcing their shared identity in opposition to common enemies.
Exactly, it binds them together.
So wrapping this up, this journey through 1 Samuel 30 is just packed. It goes from the absolute depths of despair, facing destruction and mutiny,
To finding strength, seeking clear guidance, pushing through obstacles, getting help from a totally unexpected place.
to achieving this complete, almost unbelievable recovery, and then dealing with the internal fight over the rewards by setting a principle of fairness.
Yeah, there's so much in there. When you think about it, what really stands out to you? Is it the resilience David showed? That moment he found strength when everything seemed lost?
Or maybe the importance of actually stopping to seek guidance instead of just reacting. That pause seems crucial.
And what about the Egyptian slave? Help coming from the most unlikely marginalized source. That's powerful too.
Definitely. And the leadership challenge at the end, managing success and the conflicts it can bring up, that rule David made.
Right. The equal share for the fighters and the supply guards. It really makes you think, doesn't it? That ancient law suggests something profound about how communities, how teams should function.
How do we value different kinds of contributions, especially the ones that aren't maybe on the front lines, the ones that support the main effort?
Are those contributions recognized and rewarded fairly when success comes? That principle from thousands of years ago. It still feels incredibly relevant today, something definitely worth pondering.